Hey there,
Hi,
I'm Jess,
I'm Andrew.
and this is Classic.
Movies we should have seen by now.
So, we were going to launch this series in a more traditional podcast medium, but in the spirit of the pandemic and social distancing, we decided to come at it with a video approach. And what's more fitting than talking about film through video? So this all kind of started a couple of years ago as a conversation about the fact that even though you and I consider ourselves media enthusiasts,
Read nerds, but yeah.
we are sorely kind of like missing the classic genre. We just have not seen a lot of films that were made before the 90s, really, or the 80s. So we've taken it upon ourselves to just go at whim watching some of the classic films that made contemporary cinema what it is today. And we started this journey with
1941's Maltese Falcon, starring Humphrey Bogart.
Andrew, do you want to give us a little premise?
I don't, but IMDb will.
Excellent. Thank you, IMDb.
A private detective takes on a case that involves him with three eccentric criminals, a gorgeous liar, and their quest for a priceless statuette.
So, I do want to say that this episode and probably all the episodes are going to contain spoilers. So, moving forward, if you haven't seen the movie or you want to see the movie, maybe just turn it off from here because we're probably going to just pretend that either you've seen it or you don't care. Don't care to see it.
Yeah, it's been almost 80 years at this point, though, so if you haven't seen it already,
sorry.
Yeah.
Although previously we hadn't seen it already, so we would have been
fair enough.
The individuals that were SOL. Anyway, what did you think?
It's interesting. So it's, this movie's based off a novel by Dashiell Hammett. And Dashiell Hammett, I've never read anything by him, but I do know that he's sort of like the forefather of the noir genre, which I think for a lot of people, it's mystery, it's thriller, but it usually involves sort of like a gray morality to it. Like the good guys aren't quite that good, or the bad guys are usually really bad, and it just is sort of kind of a dark portrayal of the world and people. So in that respect, I think the movie did a really nice job, and that to me is like what really drove home my enjoyment of it, was like seeing that come to life, because I think it must have been one of the first.
Yeah, definitely one of the more well-known.
Yeah.
One of the most lasting.
What did you think?
I think I've gone back and forth. For me, the part that really stood out as the positive was the fact that it's such a experience watching these older films, especially those that are clever enough to have withstood the test of time and have made it into that kind of like space within our cultural canon to be called a classic. And I feel like there's something there. There's a pacing and a gracefulness and just kind of a scope that you don't see in modern cinema. I mean, I remember remarking to you, normally I have trouble sitting still and am somebody that even during the more intelligent films that we try to watch that are filmed now, I'm like tooling around on my phone, checking email, or I'm sketching, or I'm like flipping through a magazine and kind of half paying attention. But even with this, if you looked away from the screen, you were missing something.
Yeah.
You know, there was reading, and, you know, it would either be a slide that would tell you what was coming up in the scene or something that was missed, you know, from the opening, or there would be a shot of
The newspaper ad when
newspaper
like a
clip.
big clue. It's like you know, it's really interesting to think about it like that.
So you couldn't not be engaged. And there was that. And then there was also, like I said, the grace. You know, you brought up, so there's kind of almost like this literary element where you are reading part of the story, but then there's also kind of a theatrical and dramatic element where, you know, you brought up a great point with technology and where that was.
Yeah, I mean, we were curious. It takes place in San Francisco, and everything that was shot in San Francisco, it's obvious they were really there. But the rest of it, you know, we were trying to, is that a location in LA or something like that? And it was like, no, it was all a soundstage in Burbank. And so at the end of the day, you don't have, you know, 8 cameras. You have, it's theater. It's a stage, you know, and that really came through in the grace, the way people moved and things like that.
Yeah, it was, you could tell that there was a lot of blocking. The way that people positioned their bodies, the way that the takes were so long, you know, you really had to be strategic with where the placement was.
I mean, you have to think, if they're shooting on film, the cutting, it's like, if they're cutting things.
Did you notice how there was a little bit of a gruff cut from scene to scene or take to take?
Yeah, there were moments where I was like, what happened there? Like,
it was
just
like
blurred out and moved over, and you know,
it was almost like you could actually see where they literally snipped the film and fused it together. It was all of a sudden this like kind of jarring switch. But that being said, going back to your original question about whether or not I liked the film, I wasn't as enchanted by it. I think I'm not a big fan of action or kind of like more traditionally masculine storytelling, just because I don't relate to what it means to, you know, try to prove and assert your masculinity. This is our dog,
Ruby, come.
Who's upset at something. She really liked the film, so she's going to let us know that I am wrong. It does have almost 100% or 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's exciting.
Ruby's 100%er.
Yeah, she definitely rated that. Okay, you want me to do some crate time? Go do some crate time.
It's funny because I am a fan of noir and you know, from Chinatown to Brick to even on some level like season 1 of True Detective, like you can see the DNA of this thing moving forward, and I don't know where this movie lies in that, whether it was like one of the first or not, but that's what really drew me to it.
Well, I have a couple of prompts for you
here comes the
in
notebook.
my detective notebook.
Am I the damsel in distress then? If you're the detective?
Yeah, listen.
I need your help.
Roll me a cigarette.
Yeah, oh God. I'm hysterical.
So, speaking of which, what didn't age well, Andrew?
It's tough because there's the idea of, I mean, there's the whole gender thing, which I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on. I was very much like it's off-putting. I guess one thing I can really speak to is like the idea of masculinity. Like Humphrey Bogart, his character always had like this kind of, see, I got one over on you. And I always was, except it didn't feel like, I don't know, it was just at one point he disarms the guy by putting his trench coat down around his shoulders, and it just felt a little clownish, and it felt sort of like, you know, very theatrical. And
there's kind of a buffoonery that I think was tolerated during that time.
I feel like the points in the movie where maybe someone back then would have been like, yeah, look, he's such a cool guy. I was sort of like,
I mean, this isn't even that many decades away from vaudeville. And so you have these
Interesting.
filmmakers like Charlie
Interesting.
Chaplin,
Yeah.
who, even if they're telling dramatic stories, like people are lassoing people and, you know, putting giant bags over them and
Yeah.
whacking them with hammers. Apparently, we need to see some Charlie Chaplin because that's also like another pretty gaping.
That's probably on the
hole in
list,
my-
but
I'm
yeah.
gonna put that on the list. So for me, what didn't age well was the gender roles. I mean, definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test. There was no woman who, I don't even know if the women even talked to each other. Like one point, like a
there
woman.
was one point, I think, where they talked to each other.
I think it was like her being like, "Here's the room," and her
Yeah.
being like, "Oh, well, actually, does that?" No, I don't even think they talked to each other. I just think they were in the same room together. So that was pretty blaring. And then the other thing that was disturbing was just the way that Humphrey Bogart's character talked to the damsel in distress. I mean, he, you know, precious and da-da-da. And then you pointed out the fact that the secretary was essentially like working 24/7.
Oh, he was calling his secretary it was like, tail this car, send this package. I'm like, damn, the secretary is...
Yeah, she was disposable.
And she was into it, I guess, but still, I'm like,
Well, she was just like, "Why do you have to use me?" Like, oh God, he was such a womanizer. Anyway, so that was uncomfortable. And then the other thing that really struck out to me was it was a very whitewashed movie. There was just white on white. You know, I say it's two white people in a white room, but it was a little rough.
The character, the Joe Lore character, I'm sorry, Joe Cairo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was interesting because he was supposed to be like very eccentric and
yeah, there is a little bit of an undertone of maybe like a homosexual vibe. I thought that was pretty interesting.
yeah, especially between him and Bogart.
Yeah,
Like there was a tension there that I was like,
seduction.
whoa, this okay.
Yeah, that was actually really interesting. And there's a lot of conversations about how in old Hollywood there was all of these deviant sexualities that were hidden within the films that they were making at the time. And obviously a homosexuality was on one end of the spectrum, but then there was some deviance in things like Shirley Temple being potentially part of like a veiled like child
whole,
sex reign, and who knows what Judy Garland, how she was abused. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I don't know. Those were the two. I mean, gender, race, those are always going to be problems. Not always, but like it'll be the rare exception that that's not the problem. But for me, I think the issue was that the story did not necessarily distract me away from those roles. It didn't feel like cute. It felt pretty disturbing and kind of disruptive from my ability to relax into the actual plot. So what makes this movie a classic?
I mean, it's a classic, I think, because again, the whole noir lineage piece. Like, I think previous to this, a lot of movies were kind of a very standard view of the world, like good guy doing good things, getting the girl, doing this, and blah blah. One of my favorite scenes in this film is where you kind of realize that Sam Spade, which is Bogart's character, you kind of realize that maybe his motives aren't just, you know, money or anything like it, which is a really interesting twist to me. And they hit it in the film. You know, it's 3/4 of the way through where you realize he might actually be acting from a better way. And I think that was rare. You know, I feel like up until then, it didn't happen a lot in movies.
So, well, what you're saying is that you think this movie is a classic because he is a flawed protagonist.
Right. I think it's a tragic.
But it's dynamic because really underneath it all, the root of it all. So it's also kind of playing on the traditions of the hard-baked angry detective who has no love in his heart left to give the world. Because really we find out towards the end that virtue was guiding him all along. He did feel like he needed to protect kind of like the honor of his partner.
Avenge his dead partner, yeah.
Although that actually does lead me to another question within that. I'm not entirely sure that he was doing it for that cause.
I mean, he says it. There's a scene where he's in the district attorney's office, and you kind of realize he's been doing this negotiating between the eccentric criminals, and he's essentially warding off the police who are like, we want to arrest you for your potential involvement and stuff. And he's saying, like, if you really want everyone involved, you need to give me time to do it. And you need to get off my back. And that is sort of like, that's like your first clue that he might be not just in it for the money, but then at the end, which in very kind of noir fashion, the damsel ends up not being the damsel, and she ends up being sort of the mastermind between a lot of the death that happens in the film. He says, it might be in a monologue or a voiceover, where he says, when someone kills your partner,
you're supposed to avenge.
You're supposed to do something. And then you're kind of like, oh, this was maybe the genesis of it all, of him getting deeper and deeper into this thing, was like, I got to find a way out to avenge my partner, and not just get the person involved, but kind of like everybody.
Yeah, so it really was a complex and complicated tale.
Which I think is original. It's like,
it's not just good versus evil, but it's also not just hard-baked angry detective who has no morals or no laws or principles. It's a little bit of all the above. There's a lot of layers to this character. I think that, I don't know if I have anything to add to
do you feel like it's a classic?
I do.
Okay.
I do. But I think the twist of my question is, do you think that it has earned its classic kind of place on the shelf?
Has it stood the test of time a little bit?
No, does it deserve to stay as part of the cultural canon as a classic? Not has it withstood the test of time, because I feel like, again, some Charlie Chaplin tap dancing on the top of like a steam engine. It's super dated, but should we still consider this kind of like a must-see?
I don't. It's tough. I don't think it's if you're into noir, like any of the series I mentioned before, like True Detective or Brick or Chinatown, if you like that stuff, I think you'd enjoy it. Do you have to just go see this as a film buff? I don't know. I think there might be others.
Yeah, I'm kind of inclined to agree with you. I am a pretty big... I'm a pretty big Humphrey Bogart fan, and I don't know, maybe I'm just a sap because I think I really like him, or maybe even just like the irony of him and his dark kind of like brooding gruffness in films like Casablanca and even Sabrina.
Never seen. Haven't seen it.
To be viewed for you. And I just didn't think that I don't know, like the twists and turns, they just weren't compelling, and I can't tell if it's because this set the stage for all of those,
right?
And this, is what we use as a foundation, and now I just know what to expect. But for me, like I said, it was not intelligent enough or surprising enough to make me ignore some of those problems. And on top of it, I felt like it could have been 20 minutes shorter. I just could have. I'm not saying I won't watch a good epic. I'm not saying that I need things to be fast-paced, but... Well,
we still have Lawrence of Arabia coming up, so you better tune up your epic intermission film skills.
I'm ready. All right. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for chatting, Andrew.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
And cheers.
Stay healthy.
Well done. Well done.